The
This conference will now be recorded.
For Africa Evidence Network, I will be chairing the webinar that is hosted by AEN today. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to our 11th webinar titled Exploring Communities of Practice for Evidence-Informed Decision-Making in Africa. We have 3 speakers for this session. It is a panel discussion. We have Dr. Camilla, Mr. James, and Mr. Bali. And the session will be facilitated by Ms. Fumwa, and also the question and answer session will be facilitated by Dr. Godson. As we draw closer to Evidence 2020, which is one of the exciting events that AEN will be hosting in 2020, this webinar is one of the events that we are hosting that is a build-up towards this amazing event that is going to be happening fully online in September 2020. It is part of the Workstream 3, Making Connections and Building Collaborations. The Workstream aims to support brokering of new connections and fostering collaborations with others engaged in or supporting EIDM in Africa. So this webinar has 3 distinct objectives that we want to achieve at the end of it. The first objective is to hear about conceptualization of communities of practice within the EIDM space in Africa, to pull out key characteristics and features necessary for sustaining these communities of practice. And then the second objective is to understand the risks and opportunities of communities of practice within networks for EIDM. And lastly, we aim to find out how communities of practice are sustained. So that's really, we're looking forward to that robust discussion that is going to be, that's going to happen during the webinar. Just for us to be able to manage this webinar seamless, we have a few housekeeping rules that will assist us to make sure that we're able to have discussions during this event. For you to contribute to this discussion, you can do that on Twitter using hashtag Africa Evidence Webinar, hashtag Building Collaborations, and hashtag Evidence 2020 Online. And we want to keep the technical processes very simple. We will not be using webcam for this particular session. And this session also will be recorded and it will be shared with all the participants at the end of the webinar. And the organizers will keep the microphones muted while listening to presenters to avoid background noise during the session. And also, if you have questions, please submit your questions via the chat and we'll be able to address those questions during the question and answer session. Panelists or presenters will collect all the questions submitted during this session, but today, Dr. Godson will manage and collect those questions on behalf of the speakers to ensure that the webinar is seamless and easier. Please raise your hand by writing hands up in the chat box if you want to ask a question when that opportunity is given to all the participants in the event. In case you did not get an answer on your question during this live session, the panelists will get another opportunity later to answer all your questions, and then those questions will be shared with the people that asked those questions or all the participants of this webinar to ensure that all those conversations are still continuing. In case of any technical glitches, please write to Precious at ace@uj.ac.za. She's there as the technical support for this event to ensure that if you need any support, be in touch with her. And then the next part on this agenda, just to share with you who's the host of this event. The AEN is a Pan-African community of more than 3,000 individuals who are interested in the use and production of evidence in the continent. And as a network, we aim to contribute to the end of poverty and inequality in Africa. And also, we strive to increase the use of evidence in informed decision making in Africa. And also, there are 4 ways of working in the AEN. We ensure that we inform using different mediums or modalities of engagement to inform our members across the continent. And also, we connect with our members. An example, Evident 2020 is one of those events that we're going to connect with members across the continent that will contribute to the 3 work streams that have been identified for this particular event. The other way of working, we'll continue to learn as the network in different ways. One of those is landscape mapping. And lastly, we continue to advocate for the work that the AEN does. We showcase great work that is done in the continent, and we have our Africa Leadership Award, where individuals across the continent that are doing amazing work receive this award, and their work is showcased by the AEN. So to get in touch with the AEN, those are our details. At this moment, I think I would like to take this opportunity to hand over to our facilitator, Fongwa, to manage the webinar from here. Thank you very much. Over to you, Fongwa.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Desiree, for setting the scene. It's my pleasure, colleagues, to be here as your facilitator today. We have an esteemed panel of speakers today. We're going to start off with Dr. Camilla Adele, who is a senior research fellow at the Center for the Study of Governance and Innovation, which is also attached to a DST NRF Center of Excellence in Food Security that's situated at the University of Victoria. Just to give you a brief background, a short bio to Dr. Camilla. Her research focuses on the science policy practice interface, and in particular the role of knowledge in policy making, which is what the AEN and what we're all interested in here. But in terms of her current research, it explores the co-production of knowledge of local food governance in South Africa, where she helps to coordinate a transdisciplinary community of practice, bringing together government officials, academics, and practitioners, farmers, civil society, and other stakeholders. So she is perfectly placed to answer, I think, and speak on this particular topic of how do we establish communities of practice around evidence-based policy making in Africa. So in terms of things, I'm going to, I hope you guys can hear me. I'm seeing a message saying that I've got poor connection. Am I clear, everybody?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead. We can hear you. Go ahead. Even though there's background noise where you are.
There is apologies for that. I'm not shared, so I have to leave my home for this. But I just wanted to check, Precious and Sisi, who is driving the presentation slides that has got the question? Okay, great. So, Dr. Camilla, the question that we have for you is really, in your experience, what are the characteristics and features necessary, for an effective and sustainable community or communities of practice? And I'll hand over to you, and then I'll introduce the other speakers as they come on board.
Okay, thank you so much for that introduction. It was a very grand introduction. I'm going to be speaking from my experience over the last 3 years of running and reflecting on a community of practice in Cape Town in South Africa. So it's a fairly humble point of view that I want to bring into this meeting. I don't claim to have universal knowledge or experience of communities of practice, but I'm really delighted to have this opportunity to share our learnings and experiences so far, and to also learn about your experiences And hopefully this will help us muddle through in our path as a community of practice. Before I start, I just want to say that our understanding of a community of practice that we've formulated as a community is a community practice is a group of people that come together around shared issues to interact regularly and to build networks, exchange information, and co-produce new knowledge, as well as develop collective actions. In terms of the actual questions about key characteristics necessary to sustain communities of practice, well, we share, the three common features that were set out in the original literature on communities of practice by Wenger and Lav, and that's we share a common domain of interest and expertise. Our community of practice is around food governance, in particular at the local level of governance, and we're very interested in food security. Secondly, we have a joint activity or shared endeavour. So we, before COVID-19 and the lockdown, we met 4 or 5 times a year, face-to-face meetings, about half a day. We were between 30 and 35 people. We had presentations, formal presentations, questions and answers, breakout groups, various activities. Since lockdown, it's changed quite a bit. Food security has has climbed the political agenda. It's very high in people's awareness at the moment. So we've been meeting once a month on Zoom, much more open invitation and participation. So our joint activity has evolved to fit the circumstances of the time. And thirdly, as a common feature, we have a joint practice. So we all work in the field of food security in some way. So we have a field where we can go and disseminate and test the learnings that we share together in our day-to-day lives. For me, it's the teaching and supervision and my research. For someone else, it could be the way they do urban farming, or the decisions that they make in government. So those are our 3 common features. But in terms of other characteristics, and you see a lot in the literature on communities of practice, I'm not so sure that our community of practice really shares a lot of those characteristics, and I'd like to say a bit more about potentially why. And in the traditional literature about communities of practice, the communities brought together people really from the same discipline. I'm slightly simplifying, but generally, people were either from the same company or the same field, maybe medicine or teaching. And these have recently been conceptualized as interdisciplinary COPs. But our community of practice is actually much more heterogeneous than that. It brings together people from different sectors, different walks of life, from government, from science, urban farmers, people from early development centres, from all sorts of backgrounds. And this has most recently been conceptualised as transdisciplinary communities of practice. So because we are so different, I think this somehow means that we perhaps don't have this shared identity automatically, or so much trust as maybe some of the other intradisciplinary or traditional communities of practice have. But this has some opportunities for us, because by sharing our different perspectives from different backgrounds, we have the ability to learn quite differently in different frames, and that's something I think that we'll cover in the next question. So I'll hand back to Bafungwa.
Thank you so much. Camilla. I think I'm going to now introduce the next speaker, who is James Kariuki from Kenya at KEMRI. KEMRI is one of those institutions I'm also kind of working with professionally. So when I saw that you're part of our panel, I was really, really happy. So James is a senior research scientist at KEMRI. KEMRI stands for the Kenya Medical Research Institute, and he specializes in data analytics and health systems strengthening, and he heads up the unit there. And he's also an affiliate member of the AEN. He comes with over 20 years worth of experience in conducting research in the area of health systems and development of strategic plans. And he's new to KEMRI, to the venture around, he works around knowledge management there. A significant part of his time is spent on promoting the use of evidence amongst districts and national governments in Kenya on matters relating to health, policy, programming, practice, all of these things really that has brought us together around forming communities of practice for evidence use. So James, welcome, and I think if you could also speak to the question, our topic one, which is around what's your experience with communities of practice in Kenya or across the world, and how do we keep communities of practice sustainable? James? Colleague, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
It's James. All right, James. I see James, but he's still muted. So I wonder if he can hear us.
Let's move on to Mr. Bali in the meantime while James is trying to sort out his technical glitches.
All right, sure. Thank you, Suziwe. So yeah, I think let me introduce then Bali. Bali, I am scared that I'm going to butcher your surname, but I will attempt. Mr. Bali Adriatsehena is regional representative of the African Evaluation Association. And he's by training an economist, statistician, who graduated from Carleton University. And he's got an elaborate CV, which I will not go into for time. But Bali, if you could, I think share around this question of and just speak to your experience as well in establishing a community of practice.
Thank you, Sunga. Thank you, Precious. And good morning, good afternoon to everybody. As introduced, I'm then a board member of AFREA, probably one of the biggest community of practice in Africa. And I've been asked to sit on this panel. I will share briefly AFREA's experience in these questions. The first question is, what could be the key characteristics and features for sustainable communities of practice? I would point out three main features that a good community of practice, and I would say an efficient community of practice, should really address. First of all, as it has been said, a community of practice is founded around an issue. There cannot be a community of practice that doesn't have as an objective to address an issue. So in order for a community of practice to be able to address the right issue, then everybody first has to agree that that is the right issue on which the community is founded. For example, in Africa, the main feature is evaluation. So we have to be able to push for evaluation. That's the main issue. Few characteristics that are always killing community of practices are that issue is not clear, and then the way to advance and to solve the issue cannot be clear. So that has to be really clear. What is a community of practice for? It has to do. And then the next characteristic is that a community of practice as such are as assembling practitioners. So we need to get and to improve the existing skills, and we need to train new skills into pushing and solving the issue. That means, as a matter of fact, that we have to invest in getting the right skills on the continent. You have to invest into pushing governments and organizations to invest in new skills and to invest in improving the existing skills, because issues cannot be always solved just by them. We have to be clear that we need to push for skills, we need to multiply the existing skills, and we need for governments and organizations in Africa to understand that this is an issue, we're addressing an issue, so we're pushing for more capacities on the continent to help us together solve the issues. That is very, very important. And then, of course, one of the main characteristics that a right COPE, an efficient COPE, should really be able to address is communication. A right community of practice should be able to communicate results, communicate practices, the right practices, but then also communicate the right benefits from solving the issue. Because if governments or organizations do not understand the benefits that they can get from solving the issue together with the community of practice, then the community of practice will disappear, because nobody will use its results, nobody will use its capacities, and nobody will listen to the community of practice. So those are, I think, the three main features, characteristics that an efficient, I'm not talking about a good, but I would say an efficient community of practice should really try to address. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bali, for your insightful inputs for this particular question. We would like to go to the third speaker for this question. Let me check if James has come back. We've been experiencing a bit of technical glitches, particularly because of load shedding in South Africa. And James, he's in Kenya, and he's been also struggling a little bit. Let me check him so that he can give us his inputs. James? James?
Hello.
Hi, how are you? Please, how are you doing?
Very well. Greetings from the Rift Valley in Kenya.
Thank you very much. Answer the first question for us that relates to your experiences and what the characteristics and features necessary for a sustainable community of practice. You have 5 minutes to respond to this question so that we're able to move on to the next question. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Asante sana. My name is James Kariuki, working for the Kenya Medical Research Institute, KEMRI, for the last 20 years. And that tells you that I'm in the health sector. With regarding to the issue that has been raised, my experience with the community of practice, one of the things that I have seen is that, number one, I was engaged in very many, not as a convener, but out of interest, I got into very many. And I could say that none of them goes beyond the second birthday. By the time they're hitting the second year or their second birthday, most of them are quiet, they're dormant, and then they start another community of practice or another issue. So that is one of the experiences I've had. Very many community of practice, but they don't go beyond the second year, and it brings me to the second aspect. The issues, but this, I think this is in Kenya. In Kenya is where you find that when you are beginning a community of practice, everybody is excited about the issue. It's like everybody is buying into the idea. And you begin the first session, the second, the third, the fourth. By the time you are going to the 10th, 11th, the people keep dropping. And then we have silent listeners. And then finally, you are just left the two of you. And you wonder, where is everybody? This is a second observation. Dormant people's interest wear out as they, over time, and I don't know how really to turn it around. My third experience is that we kept changing it. There's one that I started and it has been successful for the last 2 years. Is one on evidence use, where we are trying to get our districts, frontline healthcare workers, to participate in helping us understand how can evidence be used, or how can they use evidence to inform practice, programming, and policy. And one of the things I learned that has made us actually be able to sustain is because we keep changing. So the whole thing is about evidence. But when we started off, we were interested. How do we access evidence? Where is this evidence? How do you put it in a central place? Within 6 months, we changed again, and it became, the issue is no longer evidence. The issue is this quality of this evidence and whether it's making sense. As we speak today, we were in that community of practice, and we were just finding out why we were taking stock. Why did the politicians during this COVID-19, what made them take, or they were accepting evidence? What is it that they were that made them look for evidence every now and then? We produced actually we produced 43 policy briefs over the last 5 months. And that tells you the demand for evidence by government was very, very high around COVID, and they needed to make decisions. And therefore, I was telling the team today, probably it is because of the environment. Number two, it's because the kind of leaders we have in the health sector, they are now, most of them are masters and PhD holders, and therefore they appreciate the role of evidence. And thirdly, everybody wants to know what is the state, what's the state of knowledge around this issue? What are the other countries doing? What can we do? And therefore, it brings in another issue that we started, lessons learning from other counties and other diseases. So my take-home message to this group that is listening to me is that you have to behave like a chameleon. The COPs have to behave like a chameleon. When the environment changes, you change, but sustain the conversation. This is my contribution for now. Over to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James, for your insightful contribution. Let's move over to the second question. so that we get your inputs as well in terms of what are the risks and opportunities of establishing a community of practice within networks for evidence-informed decision-making. I will start with Dr. Camilla to give us, share her inputs and experiences. Dr. Camilla, over to you.
Thank you. For us, one of the main opportunity, and this isn't rocket science, has been an opportunity for social learning, and that's what communities of practices are about. In terms of transdisciplinary communities of practice, I think there are particular opportunities there, because it's a place where we can share both academic insights and also practical experiences, but most in particular, we share different framings of the problem. So our issue is about food governance and how to improve local food governance and food security. But interestingly, in this space, as often happens in complex policy problems, people's understanding of the problem differs, and there are various framings of the problem. And depending on your framing, that sets, which evidence you choose and which policy solutions are available to you. And so for us, the community of practice has been a real opportunity to listen and to understand some of the different framings of the problem, so that we could get a more holistic understanding collectively and together of the policy problem. It doesn't mean necessarily that we're going to shift our framing, but at least if we're aware of the different framings, we start, slowly to start some conceptual learning and changing our sort of positions and values and beliefs, even ever so slightly. And I think that that's been our main opportunity so far. If I can add a bit more, I don't know how far along I am in my 5 minutes. I think also it's been an opportunity to integrate different knowledges and different types of evidence, shall we say. So we've got our academic knowledge, we've got our sort of how-to knowledge from the practitioners on the ground. But I think the real opportunity for us over these years has been this sort of practical wisdom, the practical knowledge. For instance, we have decision makers, government officials there that will tell us that, no, that's a great idea, but it's not going to fly now, it's not going to work now, or how do you pin it to this particular objective that's rising? So we have that political understanding in the room, and we also have discussions about, the cultural implications, the moral implications, the social implications, all sorts of, the contextual things on the ground that matter when you're trying to make decisions. And I think that type of practical wisdom is extremely valuable when there's not, one right way to proceed. And when to be honest, we don't even have an agreement of where we want to go, even as a society. What will a better food system look like? We need to discuss those things. And thirdly, in terms of opportunity, obviously I won't say much about this, but it's an opportunity, a community of practice is an opportunity for knowledge democracy, and that's extremely important. We have an opportunity there to try and put different types of evidence on the table alongside each other and consider them. So sometimes we might have a professor presenting their academic results, and the next speaker in the same topic maybe an urban farmer, and everyone's perspective is interesting, and we do, really try and listen and learn. We're not perfect, but at least we get the different types. We try and get the different types of evidence on the table. In terms of risks, I'm sure I'm going over my time now. There are so many risks. We've heard some already. I mean, we fortunately didn't fold after 2 years. We're still going after 3. But we've made some real mistakes along the way. I think the most important thing is to just keep going, and yes, to be a chameleon. One of the major risks we found is power imbalances. They're in our society, they're in our classrooms, and they're certainly in our community of practice, especially if they're transdisciplinary and you've got different types of stakeholders in the room. So what we, and that really matters. It really matters in terms of the discourse that happens in the room and the discussion. Everyone has to be in the room to help shape that discourse, but they also have to be able to feel that they can speak up. We've tried to mitigate this. It's not easy by really making the power imbalances that do exist visible, at least, and we reflect on it as part of our discussions. And we also try and give the space. We try and see who's not in the room, and then we invite them and give them the platform. But it's a tricky thing to do, and it's a tricky thing to do in South Africa as well. You need good facilitation skills, you need mechanisms, you need awareness, and you need the ability to make mistakes and come back from it. And another risk, and I'll end after this risk, is we found a very fine line in nurturing diversity in terms of stakeholders and members of our transdisciplinary COPs, which we think is extremely important to have different stakeholders in the conversation. But at the same time, that really inhibits developing a sort of shared sense of identity or community, which obviously, distinguishes us, I think, between a community of practice and a network. So there's a bit of a fine line there between getting the different voices in the room and also fostering this sense of community. We haven't found it easy, but we have found it interesting. I think I'll end there and pass back over.
Thank you very much, Camilla, for those insights. Can I move over to Mr. Bali, and then Mr. James will follow after him. Mr. Bali, over to you.
Thank you very much. I think I would point out just a few points. On the opportunity sides, I'm seeing two main opportunities. First of them, and I start with that always, a good and an efficient community of practice should have defined a clear and a sharp issue to be addressed and to be solved. That is, once the community of practice has identified a really sharp and clear issue, then it should always have clear ways to address and to solve the issue. That is a good starting point already. That's an opportunity. I'm talking about AFREA, but Africa Evidence Network. I think both of those community of practice has that clear and sharpness of the issue very pointed out. The second big opportunity is that once the issue is clear and sharp enough, international partners and local partners accept to get the way the community of practice is going and to help and support the community to address and solve the issue. Let me take as an example on the mission of AFREA's. AFREA's mission is to push Africa to get an ownership of evaluation exercise, not to always wait for outside people to impose us evaluations, to get the evidence that we need to inform the right decisions, and not to make wrong decisions that could cost our country a lot sometimes. And the fields of application of those right decisions are a lot. I'm talking about social protection, I'm talking about poverty addressing programs, I'm talking about investment in infrastructures, I'm talking about digitizations, which is something new, almost a new field that everybody is trying to get into. If we're not informing the decision-making process the right way, and if we don't get the support from international partners, then we might end up getting into the wrong decisions, and that would cost our countries a lot a lot. On the risks, there are three main risks that community of practices always usually face. First of all, and this is unfortunately very often in Africa, the community of practice members are just interested in getting personal benefits. By getting into a community of practice, most of us, unfortunately, see only personal benefits into getting as a member. And that does not then help us focus on the issue that together the community of practice should address. The second risk is that either there are not enough capacities or existing capacities are not interested in getting together into the community of practice to help solve the issue together. That happens a lot. Unfortunately, that happens a lot. And the third risk that we have to address and to have to keep an eye on it is that a community of practice is not a community of practice if it doesn't get enough strong voice to get heard and to get the ears of our governments and our organizations to hear and then to apply whatever issue solving process we're bringing in. Those are the main risks. Unfortunately, those three risks always happen in two communities of practice, mostly in our continent. So there are a lot more, but I think those three are the main that we always have to keep in mind, and we have to watch on those points. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pali. Can I go over to Mr. James? Share your inputs with us, please.
Hello.
Please go ahead. Mr. James, please go ahead. I think as Mr. James is struggling, I think what I took out from these two speakers was incredible, because the fact that we are as a community of practice, you need to really have a strong vision that will make you, want to make a difference in your workspace or in your community of practice. So that was really interesting. And the fact that it was shared that also listening is one of those incredible things if you are running a community of practice. Mr. James, is that you?
Yes, please. Hello, it's me here. All right, I would like to share opportunities and the risks. From my experience, the opportunities that I have seen are that community of practice offers an opportunity for knowledge building and gathering of innovations and experience. That is critical because it allows us to domesticate the available knowledge around issues. So it becomes really issue-based, and we harvest local content, which we can also share with additional members or interested parties regarding it. So it's knowledge building opportunities. Secondly, they really they provide opportunities for localization of solutions, ownership of solutions. You see, when you allow me to speak and speak and speak, and as you people tend to point out certain issues without without fearing, since it is not a formal setting. So we share freely, and we get a lot of we actually get much more were it in a very formal press conference or something like that. So solutions are actually obtained quickly and they are diverse, and there is ownership. And community of practice also provides an opportunity or an environment where a good community of practice, you actually get a lot of benefits by different audiences at a minimal cost. For example, right now we are talking, it's costing me only airtime. But suppose we had you were to call us to South Africa, it would cost you much, much more in terms of airfare and others. So community of practice gives an opportunity for participants to discuss a lot of issues at very, very low costs. The risks are equally high, and for me, one of the biggest risks that I have seen, even sharing with another community of practice in West Africa relating to disease control, is that if it is started by high-profile government officials and then they exit, that community of practice will fall off, or it will disintegrate, because the champion was a high-profile government person or somebody like that. So the champions, you have to be very careful with the champions, so that the community of practice, it's not built around champion. It's not built around one particular champion, but around different issues or institutions. And the other big risk is competing interest by members. And honestly, I have seen this in Kenya. Let me speak of Kenya. You know, when we have one community of practice, say, on evidence use in the health sector, and then you find another one, evidence use on how to use research in the health sector. So you wonder, so what's the difference between these 3, 4, 5 other communities of practice addressing the same issue? So there is competing interest, and competition is very high, and therefore communities of practice are inconsistent. And finally, there are no laws. There are no laws or governance such that today James is in this community of practice on evidence. But if I feel tomorrow morning I don't want to participate, I just walk out. So there is really nothing binds me to this community of practice other than a personal interest, and I can walk in, walk out anytime. That is probably another big risk. Chair, these are my observations for now. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. James. Thank you very much for those insights. I think let's go to our last question so that we can get an opportunity for all the speakers to be able to answer this question. How do you sustain a community of practice? So I'll go back again to Dr. Camilla to kick us off with this question. Thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Camilla.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I've talked a little bit about the literature, but now I'll get much more practical. And I mean, I don't want to be too crude about this, but I think, you know, funding is incredibly important to keep these communities of practice going. There is a debate whether communities of practice should be, you know, self-mobilizing, self-steering, but like many things in our busy lives, it needs someone or a team of people who are responsible, who do push it forward. And that sort of long-term funding is tricky to get, but I think it's exceptionally important. Secondly, I think you need to stay pretty flexible and agile to stay relevant, and to be a bit flippant about this. I think a good crisis helps, because it gives the community a bit more sense of purpose. So before COVID-19, we were meeting, you know, 4, maybe 5 times a year with 30, 35 people, which was a number that we were very comfortable with, because we tried to keep it small so we could have these discussions. But as soon as lockdown happened, there was a food security crisis, and we knew that before, you know, even before lockdown actually took place. And we had a community of practice meeting on the morning before lockdown, we had government, we had more people. Our meetings now are 100 plus because of the relevance and the need for networking and new knowledge. For me, that begs the question, are we still a community of practice, or are we a network? And perhaps that's something we can discuss later. But we, as a community of practice, we need to move with the needs of the members and of society. Thirdly, I think we've tried to build strength in our community of practice by linking to other communities of practices and other networks. There's no competition here for us. We're all we're all trying to solve the same problem, and at different levels of government. So we have connected to a working group in local government, and some of their members are part of our community, and we will take part in some of their meetings. We have connected to another network called Food Dialogues, which holds sort of presentations and public awareness to the public. It's, there are various networks at various levels, and I think we're stronger by linking together and seeing how we can collaborate, and we do. And finally, it's okay. We may not sustain. We may not live forever, and that's okay. We're doing the best job we can at the moment, and who knows? I don't think we're sadly going to solve the problem of food security, but we are building relationships amongst our members now. We're building connections. We're learning together. Maybe in 2 years' time we'll be institutionalized. Maybe we'll be something else. But I don't think we need to live forever to have an impact. Okay, that's all I have to say at the moment.
Thank you very much, Dr. Camilla, for those insights. Can I go to Mr. Bali for the same question?
Thank you very much. First of all, I agree with Dr. Camilla on the importance of funding. Definitely, there's no work, there's no issue solving if there's no funding. So I will not elaborate on that. He has told a lot on it already. The second way is that a good community of
Mr. Bali? Mr. Bali, are you still connected? I think he's struggling a little bit with his connection. So I think, let me just check if James is fine with his connection so that he can answer this question, and then Mr. Bali can jump in last again. Mr. James, are you connected?
Yes, I am.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. How do we sustain a community of practice going forward? Number one, communities of practice should be issue-based and try as much and maintain issues and values going forward. Hello, I'm still here. So issue
publishing.
COP.
Hello.
Mr.
Okay. Yes. Yes.
Can Mr. James continue, and Mr. Bali will talk after Mr. James. Continue, Mr. James.
Okay, thank you so much. I was saying the first thing, communities of practice should be issue-based, sustain issues that promote growth. The second issue is that they should change in a changing environment, and keep changing, retain the big issue, the big theme in which they were formed, but keep changing the sub themes or the subtopics. For example, the one on COVID that we had yesterday, we have moved from what do the communities need to do on COVID. We are now on post-COVID Kenya, after we are reopening, what is going to happen? How will it, is it going to be business as usual? So although the community of practice was discussing initially community mitigation strategies, now we are talking about the post-COVID Kenya, and we are looking at how we are going back to literature to find out how the societies changed after a pandemic. So keep them issue change, be like the chameleon. The chameleon changes with the environment, but it still remains a chameleon at the end of the day. Number 3, the champion. There should be one champion in that community of practice who will actually keep the people together. It is true that champions are the ones who take things because they have a way of influencing other people to sustain. We normally start our community of practice with about 40 people. Within 6 months, we are only 17, and then we are 4, and then we start building up and we stable at 12, 8 to 12. So we move from 14 to 12. Why? Because people like James, who is talking to you, are passionate, and they tell somebody and they tell somebody, and you bring them back after they had fallen off. So that was an interesting observation, the role of the champions in the community of practice. Secondly, it's number 5. Communities of practice should demonstrate quick wins. We should see the values in this. We could say that, let me give you an example. We started with the East African AIDS Network that looks at disease surveillance and patterns. And then we scaled it up, it became Kenya, Uganda, Sudan. Then we tapped into the Middle East and Asia. Another community of practice was formed there. We tapped into it. And then we networked with another one called CODS in France. And now the West African Disease Network has joined. We are tapping and building one big alliance on disease surveillance, emerging disease surveillance. It all started with a simple community of practice that demonstrated quick wins, and that is we were able to influence decision makers, policy makers, to listen to us through this community of practice, and that takes me to the growth. So, Chair, those are my 4 or 5 issues that I think I humbly submit, that can sustain a community of practice. Thank you so much. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. James. Let me just check if Mr. Bali is back, because he's been having a bit of connectivity issues. Mr. Bali, are you back?
I'm here, Chair.
Yes, please go ahead.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for that. Again, I said that I agree with Dr. Camilla's importance on funding. I also, that was my 3rd point, but as James stated already, the champions. James talked about champions within the community of practice, but I would say that we also need to find champions within governments and organizations, so that we can have them as a friend, as an inside friend, to share our results, to share our concerns, and to share the issues, the solutions from the issue that we get in. So champions and champions from both sides, we need to have them. And then again, I say we need to publish and market the results of the research that we're conducting. We have to conduct research, but we have to publish and market those results. Otherwise, no one is gonna listen and gonna use whatever we find. And then last but not least, I said before that one of the main risks is that when community of practice members are seeing only their own individual interest, but then now I'm saying that a good community of practice should also find a way to compensate for its members' contribution in the issue-solving efforts, like organizing team members, finding support to give bursaries for conferences, value its members on international exchanges and platforms and so on. There are a lot of ways to really compensate for each member's efforts into contributing to solve the issues. Over to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pali. I think we've had our speakers answering all the three questions and sharing their insights, and it has been very interesting. I think what I'm taking home is the fact that, you know, communities of practice are knowledge builders, and we need to make sure that the solutions that we get from these communities of practice are localized. And, you know, when Dr. Camilla talked about knowledge democracy, I thought that was interesting as well. And the fact that communities of practice need to be flexible, agile, they need to be like chameleons. I think that's the word of the day for me this afternoon. It's really insightful. So also the fact that it's important to link with other communities of practice, so that you partner with others, so that you don't walk the journey by yourself. So I think just so that we make sure that our audience has an opportunity to engage with our speakers, I'll take this opportunity to sort of ask Dr. Godson to share with us the questions that have been posed on the chat, so that we get the speakers an opportunity to share with us their insights in terms of the questions that have been asked. Godson, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon to all the participants. We did not receive too many questions. We just have 5. And given that we almost are left with 14 minutes, I hope the next 9 minutes we will do justice to the 5 questions. First, I would like to thank all the panelists for the insightful presentations, sharing, and learnings from the field. The first question is directed to all of you, and it was asked by Ian Goldman from Cape Town. And this is a very interesting question. It reads, what do you see as the main difference between a community of practice and a network? I'll repeat, what do you see as the main difference between a community of practice and a network? Any of the panelists could actually attend to this question. Maybe to start with, can I ask Dr. Camilla to respond to the question?
Thank you so much. This is a question that I'm actually really grappling with myself at the moment. We started our community, we labeled ourselves a community of practice, and now I think, well, maybe that was a little bit arrogant. Maybe we are aspiring to be a community of practice. When I think meeting regularly is not necessarily good enough to be a community of practice, even if you're meeting with the same people. I think there's definitely a need for us, you know, shared identity or shared outlook. You know, to have a sense of community, you need to feel that you have something in common with the other people. So this is what we grapple with in a transdisciplinary community of practice. If you get too fragmented, then it's a network. If you get too common, too shared, then we're not sharing different framings and different perspectives. So I actually don't have an answer, and I would really be very interested to hear the responses from the other panelists on this one.
The question?
Yes.
Hello, Bali. Are you around?
Dr. Godson?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is James in Kenya.
Go ahead, James.
All
Please
right.
do.
Asante sana. A community of practice can start small little group, and then it grows, you know, based on one issue. But in my view, when you have the different communities of practice, either within the same locality or within the region, and they're all sharing a common view, then it becomes a network. I gave the example of the East African AIDS Disease Surveillance Network. It started as a community of practice among doctors working in animal and human health. Then the Ebola started in Uganda. It became East African AIDS Network, and some little community of practice joined in. Now we are such a big network. I even don't know. We also have a legal framework for the entire network, but for the community of practice, we don't have a legal binding framework. Only champions. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Godson. This is Barry. Hello.
Please,
Yes.
Mr. Bali, go ahead.
Okay. I think I would just say that the main difference between a community of practice and a network is that a community of practice, by definition, is founded around solving an issue. That's very important. You can build up any network on any field that you want, but a community of practice should stick together to solving one issue, a clear issue, a sharp issue, and that is the main, I think, the main difference between the community of practice, whatever the size is, but between the community of practice and a network, that is the main difference. Over to you.
Dr. Godson, the next question, please.
You can't hear me.
I can hear you now. Go ahead.
I was saying the next question comes from Nassim, and it reads, one of the challenges of communities of practice is keeping members engaged and active. What is your experience having assisted in keeping these dynamics? What has been your experience in assisting in terms of keeping these dynamics? Can any of the panelists come in? James? Hello?
Yes. Yeah,
James,
Dr. Godson, I can hear you. Yes, Dr.
Yes,
Godson.
come on
Yes.
board.
All right. One of the things is the champion, like a team leader, the overall leader. If he's able to keep everybody focused or participating, that means going out of their ways and using all methods available just to keep the conversation going, keeping the conversation going. That's a very strong role, the role of the champion. My other experience has been that where once you have issues or you can demonstrate from your community of practice that they are delivering value to all the participants. They are able to connect between the issue that the community of practice was addressing, and they're able to get value in terms of being heard or their recommendations being made. Then you get more buy-ins. Yes, so these are my two observations. Over to you, Dr. Godson. Dr. Godson, back to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Dr. Godson?
Hello? Yeah.
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. Dr. Camilla, would you want to attend to that question?
Yes, just quickly, just to highlight a challenge that we've had there. We haven't had a problem at all in keeping people engaged in general. In fact, our numbers have been increasing far more than we thought. But we have had a problem in kind of who's learning to prioritize, because if your meetings do become very large, then you've got there's a tendency to keep the conversation quite general so that everyone can learn from it and keep in with the conversation, and they don't have to be a huge expert in that narrow field. But what that does is that it keeps the numbers very large, but the conversation's quite general. And then we found we've had to have almost subgroupings that happen somewhere else to talk about the real cutting edge of issues where you really need to get people that specialize in that area and have those people together in a conversation. So to keep everyone participating, we've sort of had to bud off, have a main COP and these sort of little sub-COPs. So it can be a little complicated at times to keep everyone participating at the level that they want to participate.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My last question is just a follow-up to the previous question that panelists have been attending to. And this question is a brief one and comes from Ian. Ian says, communities of practice are often driven by a dominant actor, which provides energy, impetus, but can mean less sustainability. Would like to ask this question to panelists, all of you. How should this be handled? Anyone? James, would you want to attend?
Dr. Godson, can I start? Bali here.
Is that Bali? Go ahead, Bali.
Yeah, Dr. Godson. I think there are two ways of handling that issue, and unfortunately, the remark is very, very sharp. One way is first not to stick to just one subject, but then divide the main issue, divide the main subjects into themes, so that you create within the community of practice small thematic interest groups. That way, you make everybody interested in one thing, not the whole global thing, that you make everybody interested in one thing so that the main dominant actor cannot get a handle of all the thematic interest group. That's a very important thing, because the issue is that sometimes that dominant actor is imposing its views and its ways to see things one way or another. So one of the main ways to tackle that is to set up thematic interest groups where each members would be contributing, and where each member can feel that they're bringing in something without the main imposition from the dominant actor. And another thing is that once we have that, the community of practice should try to find very quick some other partners that could challenge the contribution of that dominant actor. That is very, very crucial. Over to you, Dr. Godson.
Thank you so much, Bali. Camilla, are you available to share some light in terms of how to handle a community of practice where there is a dominant actor that could lead to less sustainability?
Thank you. I'm busy actually scribbling notes because I'm learning a lot as we go along. As I said before, I only have the experience of one community of practice, and I think we're battling with quite a lot of these issues as it is. In terms of dominant actor, well, we have a sort of core group that steer the community of practice, and these do have more of an opportunity to pick the topics and have a say on the speakers. So we've tried to sort of spread that across a group, a steering group, rather than just the sort of secretariat, which is sort of 3 of us really, which is how we started. We make an effort to at least make sure that there are a spread of voices. So we would have dominant actors, I think, in the community of practice as a whole. But in terms of voices in each individual meeting, we do try to spread those across so that, you know, it's not government that gets more of a voice in a particular meeting, or academic speakers in particular. So we do try and spread it, the voices across the community of practice. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'm sure there were more questions, and those questions will be responded to via email to the people that shared. And also, just to take this opportunity, just to apologize for the glitches that we've experienced today. I think it's the nature of online events. So that was one of those today. However, we will share this recording with all the participants that attended, and also there will be a blog that will be written about what was discussed in this webinar, so that to make sure that people get an opportunity to sort of receive what was shared here and learn from it, and also advance the discussions around connections and collaboration. And lastly, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our speakers for being part of this webinar. Thank you very much. Thank you to our participants. Thank you to the facilitators. Thank you to the AEN team. Most importantly, thank you very much to the Workstream Working Group led by Ms. Precious Mota and her team, Dr. Godson Gacha, Ms. Fungwa, Ronald, James, and Eric. Thank you very much, everyone. And I think our time is up, but we had a lot of insightful discussions and the chat was alive as well. Thank you. Let's continue this conversation at Evidence 2020 as well, to advance more, to learn more, and be able to connect and collaborate with one another. Thank you very much, everyone. As a chair, I would like to adjourn this webinar at this point. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.